Hi everyone, Quiveen here from the comfort of my kitchen. I haven't translated that into, say, Yblááfkaky, which is the best I can do with pronouncing this language, which I created for the 24th Speedlang challenge, and I don't think I ever submitted it. So this is a language that I created for the challenge, completed the challenge, wrote all of the things that need to be written, and then just never got around to submitting it. So here it is. I created it, so I might as well show it off a little bit. It is a speedlang, so it was created with various constraints in mind. In phonology, no diphthongs, but allow adjacent vowels. I decided to include a little example down here, so you can see 3 vowels, 4 vowels in a row, 2 vowels in adjacent syllables that are still treated as individual vowels. You can see that this version is the phonemic, so these are the sounds that actually matter in the language. Phonetically, there is usually some changes. You can see especially with the tone spreading here. Generally, the default is a mid tone, but a low tone somewhere in the same phonological word can drag that mid tone down. So you kind of get a falling contour across the whole word. Voicing must be contrastive, but only at one place of articulation. We'll get to that in just a second. Have a stress system, but have the stress syllable be different more than merely in prominence. So this is kind of what happens in English. In English, there is also vowel reduction in unstressed syllables, which is something I did in this language, but there's also tone. The stressed syllable has tone. Only the stressed syllable surfaces with tone. So it's a little bit different to the very famous tonal systems that people see in Asia and Southeast Asia, but it is still a tone system. Here, I've interpreted these slashes to be phonemic. Phonemically, there is no labiovelar or palatal approximant. Phonetically, there is no labiovelar or palatal approximant. You can see that I'm using the graphemes here that are usually used for these approximants, but I'm not using them as approximants. I am using them as different kinds of unstressed vowel. So that's how they're popping up here. What we're going to do is move forward to the phonology. Here are the consonants. As you can see, the only place that voicing contrasts is the coronal place of articulation. So there's a difference in voicing for the coronal stops, coronal affricates, coronal sibilants, but there's no voicing contrast anywhere else. The labial stop is always voiced, or there is no contrast phonemically. Sometimes this probably gets pronounced devoiced. Sometimes the dorsal velar consonant, in this case, might get pronounced as voiced, but phonemically, there's just the one in each. There's no contrast. I've labeled this column dorsal. L isn't really dorsal, but I wanted to split it up from the coronal liquid here being the R or the rhotic. And you can see here, there is quite a bit of allophony with the dorsal fricative. Really, there would be uvular realizations as well. Anything in between glottal to velar and even palatal or post-palatal kind of noise. So those are the consonants. Here are the vowels. On the left, we've got the actual IPA notation for the vowels. Then we've got how they are represented graphemically. So we've got a couple of graphemes for the unstressed central vowels, and they are always unstressed. So the central vowels can only come up when they're unstressed. They're actually the result of a merger between the front vowels and the back vowels. Here you can see that the non-central vowels can be long and possess high, mid or low tone in stressed syllables only. So the length contrast and the tone contrast only surfaces in stressed syllables. In secondarily stressed syllables, you get the collapse of the mid-close and mid-vowels. In unstressed syllables, you get the collapse of basically all of the vowels, becoming either the central high vowel or the central low vowel, or the central mid vowel. The low vowel just disappears sometimes if that is phonotactically allowable. So that pops up in a few different places. These are the morphosyntactic constraints. So I have a dual form for verbs. I've used that as a special form of the verb root. A change happens to the verb root when there is a dual subject. We'll see that when we take a look at the verbs. have a normal-ish set of tammy distinctions, and then exactly one weird outlier. So tammy is tense, aspect, mood, evidentiality. You can add in other things like mirativity and volitionality, but tam, tense, aspect, and mood, they're the main ones. There's usually some tam contrasts in almost every language, even if they're not synthetic, even if they're not agglutinative or fusional. They might come up as individual words or particles, but there's almost always those distinctions. And having a weird outlier, a normal set of tam would distinguish things like past, present, and future in the tense, things like perfect and imperfect, perfectivity in the aspect, and things like, could be definite, could be irrealis for the mood. Having a weird outlier, well, that's what we'll get to in a second. Nouns have at least 3 cases. 2 of the cases must be called static and dynamic. We'll see that when we get to the noun cases. Use inversion on nouns or verbs or both to indicate something. So the creator of this challenge meant by inversion, swap the vowels, change the tone contour, swap the manner or place of articulation of some consonants. I went with fully swapping consonants. I went with metathesis for most of the verb roots and some of the noun roots as well. Somewhere include deliberate ambiguity. I may have done that. Maybe there is some ambiguity in here. So here, dual verbs and inversion because they go together. Here is the simple first singular eat. So we can see the morpheme here for first. I've left it completely unmarked because it is just first singular. And we can see that that vowel gets reduced to the central vowel because it's unstressed. The stress syllable is where the tone is here. And this is a mid vowel, so it's a long mid vowel with a rising tone. That's what my little peaking circumflex here is for. So we have that normal intransitive. I've got a special version of the pronoun to mark transitive clauses because the third person is unmarked. And that's pretty common with agglutinative languages. Very often a third person object will be unmarked, and that is the object here. Even though it's coming ahead of the subject, it does look a little bit strange. But we can see that there's only a subtle difference. There's only one consonant of a difference between these two, and that does relate to the transitivity. Here we've got the dual version, and you can see here the root of eat, clom, becomes lcom. The L and the K swap places. There is metathesis. So that metathesis is what gives us this different form of the verb. And here's the dual. You can see that a lot of the time the dual pronoun would actually fuse onto the start of the verb. But really, you can drop these pronouns. You don't need them because they're already tracked by the verb, whether it's the marking, which doesn't differentiate duality, and the verb then, which does differentiate duality. You can see that here for the transitive version as well. It still fuses together. It's still very subtle differences between the two. And then down here, you can see that there's a distributed. So we two eat would usually mean the two of us are eating at the same time, eating the same thing. The two of us eat it would normally mean the two of us are eating the same thing at the same time. But with a distributed marker stuck onto the front, this kind of separates out the pronoun from the verb. They don't smush together as easily with this consonant in the way because it's not two of the same vowel coming next to each other. But it does show that we both each eat. It's the two of us eat this, not necessarily at the same time, not necessarily together, and the same here with the transitive version. That's a little bit about the verbs. Here's a little bit more. So we've got normal tam. I've decided to go with kind of a past future, not exactly. So we've got a future marker for I will eat and a completive marker for I have finished eating. And it's got a telic marker here as well because you've done it, you've completed eating. So it's the completive and the telic really that are telling you that you've finished something. You can stop doing something that's atelic as well, but it wouldn't necessarily be finished. You've just stopped doing it. We can see here the irrealis, nice normal mood, the irrealis, turning that into a maybe. And here we've got the future completive telic, just to show that the completive and the telic, they can be used for a past and they can be used for a past in the future for this I will have eaten. And so we can see there, this V just means vowel. So it's just copying over kind of the closest vowel that it can. That should really be written a little bit differently. That should either be a Y or a W, but that's okay. Yeah, it should be a Y there. But that is just expanding on that verb. Here is my weird outlier. The delirious or deliriant mood or tense. I guess it's a mood because it's I don't know if I actually ate or not. Could be used in a lot of different cases. Originally, my idea for this was that it would be used in the case of certain rituals, or if you're under the influence of certain things. Maybe you hallucinated that you ate and you didn't actually eat. So there is, here's my simple transitive future, I will eat it. The it is implied because it surfaces as a null morpheme. And you can see there's still, a difference. They're very, very close, but there is still a difference. These don't really show ambiguity, not yet. So onto the nouns, 3 cases, one called dynamic, one called static, and inversion. We've got inversion again. So here we've got the stative, first person singular. If we go back a little bit, I don't think I marked it, but these ones are actually the dynamic, and they are used with verbs that could be transitive. This verb, it can't really be transitive. If you try to transitivize green, then it usually ends up being to make green. It becomes a causative, and we have this down here. So we've got our stative for I am green, and here in a multiple, into a transitive version, the causative, it's you made me green. But because I am an object here, an object that's getting changed, I get put in the dative, and the second is still in the dynamic. So we've got a stative or a static, a dynamic, and a dative case. And the dative case is also used for recipients and stuff like that. Here for you cut me, again, I am being cut. I'm being changed by your cutting. So we can see here we've got our first, we've got our second transitive showing that it's transitive, and we've got cut. So that's what turns into this. I'll get to this little change here in a minute. Also these changes here, I'll get to those in just a short while. Here's the stative, again, I am cut. Here you are in a state of having been cut, so it's almost like a resultative, but a full verb rather than a nominalization. And here, I am made green. You've got your little inversion there, which in this case, it swaps what vowel is getting stressed. So normally it would be the root vowel that would get stressed. But here, because of the inversion, the stress is shifted onto a different vowel. So that allows the first to actually surface as is, a long E noise, rather than just surfacing as is instead with that short central vowel. So that's a different type of inversion, not the metathesis, but a different kind of inversion that I've added on to the verbs in order to deal with this particular change here. So here's all 3 cases, being used in a ditransitive verb. The verb to give is the usual ditransitive I go for. So the giver, you give, that's in the normal dynamic case, which I kind of leave unmarked. That's kind of the default case. The it being given isn't changed. Its position changes, but it isn't changing. So it's in the stative, and then the first dative, the recipient, the normal usage of the dative case is for the recipient. And then we've got all of this. This is a subject direction. We can see that it's the third object, unmarked, second transitive, general give. So this is a general object. Something is being given. We'll get back to that a little bit later. It is given to me. Third state of it, first state of recipient, nice and normal. Even though the third person here is technically a subject, it is still null marked. Even though it would be the subject of the clause, it's still null marked. You can tell that it's supposed to be there, but it's not very obvious. It doesn't surface in that way. This is being given as a stative verb. It is given, but that's just showing that the subject is in the stative in this particular case because it needs to. It doesn't need to do it for a lot of the other verbs that would take that stative. I am given it. Again, I'm in the dative, I'm the recipient, even though I'm the subject, and you've got that little inversion here because of the way that the object is deleted. Some of these, the inversion, the stative here, they're kind of taking over for the normal transitivity marker. The transitivity marker is normally used when there is a third null subject, or for some reason that the subject isn't surfacing in the clause, or for some reason that the object isn't surfacing in the clause. So we can see that coming out here. And again, we can see the change in where the stress comes. So here there's end reduplication for this verb, but the main verb nucleus is still the one being stressed and possessing the tone. For the inversion here, we can see that shifting. So this vowel is getting reduced in this form of the word, but in this form of the word, that vowel isn't getting reduced, it's the other one. So that's the inversion happening again. These are a few other things. Have a diminutive register. I'll get to that pretty close to the end, I think. Translate 5, just used a minute of your day, or other sentences. I've got those 5 sentences translated. Have a weird color texture term. We'll get to that in just a minute as well. Include 2 sets of words that exhibit sound symbolism. I'll get to the sound symbolism. I'll explain sound symbolism when I'm showing it off. The Easter eggs, include an Easter egg from a book or a movie. I have done. Use the attached picture of ischemic writing as a basis for your writing system. I haven't done. I don't make writing systems very often. I usually stick to just Latin or variations of, real world writing systems. So I didn't create my own ischemic writing system for this. Here is a sentence. This is one of the sentences. So we can see it's a nominalization for stative shine. So it's that which shines, which is light. Light would have originally been a verb, to illuminate in this language. And it's only when it's nominalized that it gets to serve as an actual noun. Sound, however, does act as a normal noun. It's just put into the dative case, which gives us this little fun reduplication inside the nominal root. Then faster, to show that it's faster. Fast is a verb in this language. So it goes fast. It's a general thing that goes. So we have that same particle or affix. It's now being used as a suffix or potentially as a root verb. It's a root verb here because it's remaining stressed. So again, that one's a little bit weird. I'll get to it in just a second. We can see that this long A, it's not stressed. It's not secondarily stressed. So it just completely deletes. It's allowed. You can start a word with the velar nasal in this language. So it just goes away. We can see the other vowels getting reduced here as well. And this one's retained. Again, the L and the F, they're doing something here to turn into a B. I'll explain that in just a short amount of time. We can see here how this vowel is completely deleted. This retains some amount of stress. So the deletion of the vowel, the A vowel, the low vowel here, it comes after the stress assignment for primarily or secondarily stressed. So that can lead to some weird things like 2 secondarily stressed vowels appearing next to each other. We can see similar reductions in the vowels here. So this secondarily stressed E stays E. It only would get reduced if it was in an unstressed syllable. For example, this long U, because it's unstressed, it just gets turned to U, and because it's not secondarily stressed, it gets turned to E instead. And those versions are palatalizing. So we can see here the schwa is still there, but it could just turn into a syllabic consonant. The schwa is still there phonemically, but it could just turn into a syllabic consonant phonetically. We can see the high tone kind of stretching across the vowels here, and you can see it with these ones here as well. They're maintaining a degree of height. You can see the final vowel getting dropped there. These would kind of blend together as a result, and the palatalization turning this into a palatal stop and this into a palatal fricative. So there's a fair bit of allophony, but I don't go into it in too much detail. So the diminutive register can be used for a lot of things. It's often used when speaking to children. It's basically baby talk. Sometimes with domestic animals. I'm sure we've all seen people using baby talk to speak with their pets. Diminutive registers usually simplify various consonants. So in this case, we're taking the same sentence that we just looked at. The stops are getting turned into sibilants. So that doesn't mean actual sibilants. The sibilization can cause affricates instead. So the T becomes a T instead with this first layer. Clusters are broken up. Clusters are often broken up in baby speech. So we've got the insertion of an A in there to break up that cluster. The vowels are raised. This is also very common in baby speech. So we've got the As going, or the As going up to Oz. We've got the A going up to O. And this is another common change that happens in baby speak. High tones on stress. So the tones are already high here. But in other words, the tones would be raised higher on stress syllables. Or the stress syllables that might not have a tone or might have a low tone, they'd be raised up. A melody then, basically this means that the tones are alternating from high to mid to high to mid. the unstressed or secondarily stressed syllables are getting this kind of tone to give it a sort of a rhythm. Then there's lenition. Stops outside of stressed syllables are lenited to fricatives or affricates. So we can see that here happening with the B there, turning into an F, and occasional vowel fronting. I don't think that's popped up here, but in other versions of the words, or in other sentences, some back vowels, particularly oo becoming E, those kinds of things. Again, it's to do with prominence and also kind of making things sound cute. High front vowels are often seen as smaller or cuter, and that's kind of what happens when people end up talking to babies and to animals. Really, the diminutive register would have special words as well. So for example, if we come back, these words are all pretty complicated, but if we come back to a nice simple word like, well, green cut, maybe, it's there is tisk, it would probably, or tisk, it would probably come out as tis, maybe, or tisak, but it could just be a completely different word, like snip or owie, the way people say owie or boo-boo instead of injury. Those are the kind of lexical changes that one would expect. So here's an Easter egg. The Big Sleep by Raymond Chandler was the previous book that I had read just before doing this challenge, several months ago now. So the Big Sleep is really a euphemism for death. So I decided to include that. The normal root for sleep is, it just means sleep when it's in the normal version. The augmentative, or the bigger version of to sleep, is die. And I also added a diminutive, punctive, one brief event, an event described as a whole, for to blink as well. So we can see how these different prefixes on the verb are able to change the root verb into these different meanings. They'd be pretty much lexicalized. So you wouldn't say this to mean I sleep a lot or I slept a big sleep. It would be lexicalized as to mean die, and you'd need to use some sort of adverb or adjective to turn it into a big sleep. And then I've also decided to add in I'm casting off as a sort of a idiom for I'm leaving, I'm heading out, I'm casting off. So you're basically de-tying or tying away, tying off or away from yourself. It's there imperfect, the imp there. So we can see some vowel changes there, the quality of the vowel changes. There's actually, I believe it's the quality of the vowel swaps around and we just can't tell because it's getting reduced in this way, almost disappearing that vowel when everything gets spelt out. Then this is the name of the language, really. We speak it is the name of the language. So we can see that there as Yblááfkaky. And that vowel does reduce a lot at the end. It practically disappears. It almost disappears. It wouldn't disappear in careful speech, but it would disappear in running speech. So we can see there the plural, many people, for the plural being marked on the verb, for stative or for it being an ongoing thing. So there's initial and final reduplication on this verb, which gives us, a pretty polysyllabic looking form, but a lot of those vowels get reduced and some of them disappear to produce this version instead. So moving forward, sound symbolism. Sound symbolism does pop up in English. A lot of the words to do with light, glint, glimmer, gleam, they have that gl noise. There's also some other sets of words in English where certain sounds seem to go with certain concepts. So I've gone with just a little bit. Of sound symbolism here. So I've got my velar, some sort of velar with an L and an M to mean something to do with eating and swallowing. So gulp, to be, tasty. Most of the adjectives are verbs in this language. Eat, drink, delicious. I think chlaflam, that's a nice word for delicious. Chlaflam. That sounds nice. Chlam is just to be tasty, so there's this kind of special reduplication going on there to make it delicious instead of just tasty. You can see here clom, which we've run into before, and gloom. Most of these ones with that are disyllabic, the vowels would be reduced in different ways. So something like oklum would be pretty close to how this verb would actually pop out. Same here with flying, fluttering, buzzing. I've got the fricatives and the sibilants here, so we can see the kind of rough pattern here. It's almost like a templatic or a root and pattern language, almost like the triconsonantal roots of a Semitic language, but these aren't productive. You're not coining new words just by adding vowels to here, and adding the vowels to here don't do things like changing tense and aspect. It just so happens that all of these words they end up with these same collections of sounds due to sound symbolism, and a lot of it would be to do with analogy. Some of these words in an older form of the language probably didn't have these consonants in a row, but by analogy with other words with similar meanings, they would have ended up with those same consonants. So the color texture terms, I decided to do some interesting polysemy, or what I think is interesting polysemy anyway. So to be green, the color, also means metaphorically to be fresh, but it roughly means to be crunchy as well. So it's a texture term as well as being an appearance term. And the same happens for the other colors. The colors in general are matched up with these textural things. Very often they're things that are texturally related. So we've got light brown, like paper, related to rough paper or rough cloth, but a darker brown is related to things like bark and scale. So they're different kinds of roughness. This one here, bee smoky or ephemeral, it's kind of a bee grey, but a specific shade of grey. Carme, that's a reference to character Carmen in The Big Sleep. Similar here for orzi, it's a reference to orchids, which are mentioned in The Big Sleep as well. So a couple of other references in there, but primarily they are color terms. So we can see here the tree is green. The tree in the stative case, as you can see, which kind of surfaces as a disfix in this particular case. And there we go. Not sure why it's I, but it's an animate object here, or possibly an inanimate object. I'd have to double check actually. It might be an inanimate object. The green tree, this is the adjective being used attributively rather than predicatively, but it's a verb, so the predicative form is kind of the normal form. To use it attributively, it actually needs to be turned into basically a relative clause. So this would almost be the which is green tree, with this sort of embedded relative clause inside the noun phrase that it's modifying. And you can see here the non-stative form of tree, or sna, is there instead of sna, the stative form, with that difference in vowel length. So here we've got the plant is green or fresh. It's ambiguous. So here we've got the plant in the stative and it being green. Could be green, could be fresh. But when we're saying that it's plant matter, so here we've got it is green, the plant, or the green plant, but with this leafy modifier here, this shows that it's not the full thing that we're talking about. We're really talking about a part of the thing, or things that have a certain shape. It's not really a plant, it's plant matter. And that's what would say fresh. Again, it could be fresh, but also crunchy. Fresh, crunchy plant matter. And very similarly, these verbal prefixes are used to kind of derive or modify the meaning of the verb, and still there. Relativized, it's still the it is leafy, or the it is green leafy plant, which would mean really the which is crunchy plant. So here we go. This is a particular verb, to lie, sock. It's a little tricky to pronounce because this sh, it's not sh, it is s. It's an s followed by a h or followed by a velar fricative, depending on how you pronounce it. I think that would be dialectically, there would be some variation here. So the basic form of the verb root is essentially the nomic. It's pretty much tenseless, but it's often used in reference to the present tense or ongoing or habitual things. We've got the imperfect or the continuous, which is non-habitual ongoing. It is the continuous ongoing. We've got the irrealis, the optative, and the deluded or the delusional, which is the I may have or I may have not, I can't remember, I can't tell because of whatever was going on at the time. So we can see that changes the quality of the vowel and the length of the vowel, change in vowel quality there for the optative as well, change in final consonant, and this is sort of a reduplication with a change for the imperfect. So they happen in singular, dual, and plural forms. The plural uses initial reduplication, so we can see that happening there, and the dual uses that metathesis. But sok, that's not an allowable initial cluster, so it has to be ach sok. You can see similar things happening here with the prothetic, I believe, vowel here being thrown onto the front of that cluster. This is the conjugation, the subject conjugation. So the subject morphemes are prefixes, and here they're being shown in their sort of surface forms. This is the underlying form, and then this is the surfacing form. So you can see those changes slightly different where the vowels are reduced and stuff. So these are all subjects. First, second, and fourth person subjects. Fourth person subject is the logophoric subject, so it's used for differentiating between two what would be the same person otherwise. third acting on fourth. We've got that example here of a third person subject and a fourth person object. So that's how this comes up. And we can see that there's the direct, which has a dynamic subject. There's the static, which has a static subject, and the inverse, which is dative promotion. I'm showing it as dative promotion here. So these are basically voice altering operations, but they do some of these changes. Some of them are changes in the form of the pronoun prefix. Some of them are changes in the prominence, what vowel is prominent. We've got end reduplication here happening as well. And for the plural, we've got in the plural and the static, we've got initial reduplication and final reduplication. So of course that word ends up a lot smaller. Coming up to the top here, these aspect markers are prefixes as well. But the prefixes don't actually surface as, you know, they look. You can see the L surfacing here as it looks, but the N changes the voicing. The H also, well, it seems to add a H here. It changes the S to a H basically. And the T here, it turns the S into a T. It adds a T to it. It makes it an affricate. So these aspect markers, they hardly ever actually surface. You can see the L surfacing here as a L, but they hardly ever surface like that. They normally cause changes to the initial consonant of the root. Some of you might be able to tell where I got my inspiration from there. So here's a bit more of the transitive paradigm. So you can see here we've got area and generic as well, different types of third person. So we've got our first transitive acting on the third, the second transitive acting on the third. So that changes the form of the subject prefix because they're transitive subjects, not intransitive subjects. We can see third acting on first, third acting on second there. The third area, it's a different form of third person. The generic third person is there. We've got first transitive acting on second, first on area, second transitive on first. Of course, there's all the different possible combinations, but they come up, they interact in some different ways. We can see two vowels coming together in these examples as well, meeting that constraint. The future, it's a nice simple prefix, turning them into the future, so we can see them here underlying and here as they would be spelled out. Same with the transitive forms here. There's also a usative, which is a lot like a habitual, because the basic version of the verb is a nomic, which could be an ongoing or regular event. The usative emphasizes that it is something that happens, stops, happens again. It's a regular or usual event, but it's not going on all of the time in the background. We've got that in the transitive there as well. Same with the stative forms of the verb. So these are, as you saw in one of the previous examples, often used similarly to resultatives. The completive and the future completive. The completive and the future completive are separate agglutinative prefixes, but I do like showing how they interact. So of course you can have the completive pairing up with other things as well, but the future completive just shows that kind of past in the future that I mentioned earlier. The perlative is usually a noun case where it means like next to or along or adjacent to. I've put it on the verb instead, so it's more like the verb is happening along or across something. Same with the future completive perlative. We can stack up the prefixes here and get the verb even longer. Here we are with a couple of nouns. So this is the word for mist. The dual form, it's actually metathesis. It looks like it's not metathesis, but it is metathesis. The plural, we've got initial lenition. The collective, we've got this reduplication with this N infix as well. Then we've got an augmentative, a diminutive, and a locative form. So the locative form here, it's a location. It's the misty place. It's not at the mist. So it's not really a locative case. It's a locational derivation, just a little bit different. So we've got examples there of the dynamic, static, dative, and locative for singular, dual, plural, and collective. So you can see how some of these words do get a little bit long. If you are giving something to the mists, then you'd have this bananast. But some of these would be deleting as well. So it's probably more like bananst, with this S turning into a syllabic, but different. I'd have to see how it would actually come through in the spell out. We've also got possessive prefixes, sort of prefixes. The possessive prefixes are fusing onto the noun because this is a possessed noun, a heart. We've got generic and separate. So generic means somebody's heart. Third could also mean somebody's heart, but usually that is somebody you know. Generic, this is any heart at all will do, rather than the heart I was talking about. Separate, this does mean a heart on its own. So it's with these kinds of languages that have obligatorily possessed nouns. You can't just say heart. It has to be my heart, your heart, their heart, the other person's heart, a heart, or this heart that isn't in a chest cavity anymore. It doesn't belong to anyone in any way that matters. Here we've got a couple of other, these are not prefixes, these are particles. Some of them would be proclitics. So this is the definite article, the indefinite article. I decided to use different words for that. This is the proper article. This is a proper article. This is a proper article that normally designates inanimate things. In this case, it's a proper article with the plural as well. Then this proper article is used animately for people's names or for the name of the language. So we've got say bast, similarly to how we have say Yblááfkaky. That's the proper article. So it's very similar to the proper article in Polynesian languages. Pops up in Maori, the proper article. So I've decided to use that here as well. Now we've got to where the generic would be. I don't have the generic here. I've got the round and the pack and the geographic instead. So these are verbal classifiers. They classify the type of object that the verb is acting on. So here we've got you give it a round thing to me, and you've got that verbal round prefix. Then you give it, or you gave it, a pack to me. So that is the pack verbal prefix instead. So that is the difference. This rail turning into just ril, and this hads turning into just hads, and geminating. It becomes a long version just because of morpheme collision here. So these are verbal classifiers. Then we've got this geological classifier. So this GeoX, it means geographic existence. This is this is basically the copula, but it's a special copula that's used for geological features or geographic features or locational things. And there's similar copulas for round things, for packs. There's also special motion verbs like go specifically for these shapes. So I'm sure you can tell what language I was taking inspiration from with these classifying verbs and with my aspectual sort of prefixes that normally disappear. That brings us to the sentences. This is the first sentence I translate into any language. The small animal eats its plants here. So we can see small is actually a verb. It's being relativized here. So it's the which is small animal. The animal is a little animal, so we're putting it in the diminutive as well while we're here. But it is also genitive. This is a possessor, and it's in the dynamic. So there's a fair few things going on here, but a lot of them are realized as null. Then we've got our plant. So it's the small animal, its plants. Here, it eats. Bound, it just means that the area involved is bounded. It's not a huge area, it's a specific area that's being talked about, a bounded area. It's in the usative because it eats, it does it regularly. I usually put that in the usative or the habitual. It's telic because it eats its plants and then it finishes. It doesn't keep eating the plants or eat a little bit and leave and come back. It eats the plants, it leaves, comes back, it eats more plants. Leafy, just to classify that we're eating plants here. It's a plant eating kind of thing. So here we've got it, the underlying form, and you can see all of these slashes for things like alternations of consonants, reduplication, additions of vowels. We've got our T here, which ends up forming a geminate in this case, for this T prefix. And here we've got, this is the surface form with the vowels deleted. I've got an alternate orthography here that just shows the vowels in a slightly different way. Then we've got our phonemic spell out. So we've got our long vowels and we've got our tones and where those tones line up. But in the phonetic, you can see that some of the vowels disappear, palatalizing the consonants that were around them. So we're losing two whole syllables here. It's not really ne-ele-thil, it's nie-fil. They blend together in that way. Similarly here, it's not toch-si-on, it's not toch-si, it's toch, because of things like deletion and the change of the syllables. So it's a little bit of a weird one. Then it continues on in a similar way. We've got the formation of syllabic consonants. We've got the change in the type of tone because it can't actually be low. It falls across that length. It can't just start low. Similarly for here, it can't actually be high. It has to be almost high. And that isn't a phonetically, there is multiple levels of tone. Phonemically, there's high, mid, and low. As you can see, there's only high, mid, and low marked anywhere there, but we have these risings, these not quite as highs, these fallings. Those are the result of Sandy effects really changing the pronunciation. So moving on, this sentence we've already taken a look at. That's the first of the Zephyrus test sentences. Here's the second. I'm showing here that the pronoun could be dropped. This pronoun could absolutely be dropped. The summer and winter are being used in collective forms here. So it's, do you like summers or winters? Not specifically this summer or this winter or that winter. It's in general the season. And between them, which do you like? And it's distributed because it is between them. It's an or. It's not, do you like winter and or summer? It's pick one. The verb to like is distributed. And it is plural. I'm just assuming it's plural. Do you, it could be plural. We don't really know in English. I'm just going to say it's do ye like summer or winter better. So we can see various slashes here for metathesis, and we've got our infixes here as well. We've got various long vowels, some of which get reduced. And here, this double A for up, which is also used for over and better in this case. That vowel dropped in one of our previous examples can't drop here. It needs to stay because angdu, that's not an allowable initial syllable. You can't have ndu as your first syllable of the word. You need to have an extra vowel in there. You can see my alternate spelling here. With the vowel dropped out and with the alternate spelling, it doesn't look too much longer than the English version, and some of these syllables would be dropped as well. And that's just one way I like to check if I am, creating a language that's reasonably efficient. You've got the same amount of information in the same amount of bits, even if this language might need to be spoken a little bit quicker. It's got fewer phonemes than English, so you can speak it a little bit quicker and you can allow for that little bit of allophony. Here, again, it's the lofty mountains, so we need to relativize that tall, that geographic tall, be tall in a geographic way, to everything's in dual, so I don't even need to say to. Everything's in the dual. It's shown by the suffixes that we're talking about something dual. And you can see this goes way off the end here. There's a lot to it. So between two lofty mountains lay a fertile valley. The fertile valley isn't like a stick. It passes through the mountains. So we've got a sort of a cursorial here showing that it's happening across an area, along an area, not necessarily along the side of something like you would have in something like the perlative. Although I'm pretty sure the perlative and the cursorial are pretty much the same in this language. I'll have to double check that. So you can see, same thing, definite article, the collapse of certain vowels, palatalizing the consonants that are around them by disappearing when they can. We can see some changes on the tone, how the tone Sandy is applying to these words, not just high, but rising over the course of the word. We've got a couple of syllabic consonants in there as well. Back here, a couple of syllabic consonants in this sentence. So that's another one of the Zephyrus test sentences. It does wind up looking a little bit long. That's probably because of all of those jewels that are in there. Here, the mist will probably clear away. Probably is just a preverbal particle. It's its own word. It's an independent word. It's not part of the conjugation. There's a lot in the conjugation of these words. I've included a lot of things. It's quite synthetic. A lot of things do stick together here. So I've decided to have some analytic constructions as well. I think that's fair. So that is, yes. Here is, I think, the fifth of the sentences. Here under this tree, they gave their guests a splendid feast. So I've proposed the here. I think that's something that this language could do, even though it might want it to be a little bit closer to the verb. Again, it's the treed location. This one, the proximal, really that should say proximal. Down locative. So it's under, it's at the under. But again, it's under, it's not at the down. This locational suffix it's a little bit more lexical than just a locative case. We've got our third plural dynamic because they gave their guests a speech. The guests are the dative. They're the ones being given something, whereas the tasty meal is in the stative. It's being given. It isn't actually changing. And yeah, pretty sure this is in the distributive as well. There should be a little line in there, I believe, separating those out, but that's okay. And we've got it here in our various spellouts. So you can see I went through a couple of different ways. that I could write this language. There's a few different ways to spell what I'm trying to get across here. You can see that the difference in the vowels isn't shown in some of the syllables. This is not a, but because it's the unstressed syllable, it would be pronounced anyway, or it's only secondarily stressed, so it would be pronounced anyway. Because there was another A in there, it's the unstressed one, it dropped out. So that's why we have secondarily stressed next to primarily stressed. The intervening unstressed vowel is gone. It's dropped out completely. The L and the T have combined together there to create D. They've affected sort of each other rather than affecting the verb. And of course, with the inverse and everything, you've got different, you've got vowels coming out with the plural, you've got reduplication. So it all comes out a little bit strange. And then you've got the phonetics for that. So that, I believe, is the last sentence. Yep, that's the last set of 5 sentences. What I will do is just very quickly look at how the little prefixes change the consonants that they come up against. So let's see if I can shift this over a little bit. I write these things in almost a little bit of a shorthand, so it can be a little bit hard to tell. But you can see that the labial, an L pops up. It might not pop up at all. It might just be left ambiguous. It might be left for context. Whereas an F will change into a B when it comes up against this L. The L will usually disappear. Same down here, it becomes a geminate. You get 2 L's. We can see these changings. The nasal consonants here don't change, but N becomes L. Not too many changes here, except for this becoming an affricate. Coming down to the H's, you can see that a lot of things just turn into H when they abut this capital H, like the S turning into a H, the Z turning into an S. It's very similar to lenition, really. It's basically lenition. Except here, it's foretition, the R turning into a D, going from a tap to a stop, or a different kind of occlusive. That's technically foretition, so it's not super simple. Here, the T, we've got a lot of gemination, but gemination isn't exactly what it's for. You can see it devoices the labial, which means it has to turn into the fricative, whereas it fortifies the fricative, which means it has to become voiced. It actually voices it, but that's just a quirk of the system. You can see some interesting clusters forming there with the rhotic and the lateral, and also their difference between them collapses, so that's another source of potential ambiguity. The nasal then, it adds a nasal, it causes voicing, it causes gemination. Nothing disappears, and there's usually some sort of nasal in the result. So that is, I just thought it'd be nice to show off a little bit of the detail in those aspectual prefixes, those little changes, because they are, I think they're one of the more obvious parts of the inspiration. These little prefixes, sort of prefixes that disappear, that cause consonant changes that don't usually pop up on their own, and the classifying verbs. I think between the two of those, what language I was mostly using as my inspiration, or what language family, it becomes pretty obvious. But maybe you can guess it in the comments below. I hope that you enjoyed this video, and if you created a language for the 24th Speedlang challenge and you didn't get a chance to submit it, post about it anyway. There should be a Reddit comment linking to this video. You can post it there. You can post it in the comments of this video, or you can head to my website, queevinscontent.ie, where I will have a write-up of this video. Might be easier to follow. I'll correct any mistakes that I made as well, so do check that out. If you enjoyed this video, please do like it. If you like this kind of content, then please subscribe to this YouTube channel. I've done a lot of languages in the past couple of videos, so I might do a little bit of world building in the next video. I might just do another language. I'll see how I feel, but either way, you'll find out if you subscribe to this YouTube channel and get notified on when that video comes up. And as I said, you can read this information on my website as well. So thank you very much for watching, and hopefully I'll see you back here next time.